Hi everyone, my name is Kassadie and this is my Redesign product. I chose to redesign my ecosystems unit that I do with my 5th graders. My previous instruction for this unit was mostly direct instruction, the memorization of facts. It was very baseline information, and I relied heavily upon the mystery science lessons that my school subscribes to. So for the redesign, I've tried to do less direct instruction, still using the mystery science lessons because they are hands-on and they are inquiry-based, but I wanted to include more cross-curricular opportunities, especially involving the integration of technology and ELA. Something that has been lacking from my science instruction is some sort of final product for each unit, and that begins with, in my opinion, answering an overall question. So I've created that as well. This is an example of a Teachers Pay Teachers product that I've purchased in order to build background knowledge with my students. Basically, they are just articles with a comprehension question at the end. These articles are helpful because they have a great deal of information, but it's very surface level. I wasn't doing anything with this information. And my students were simply just reading, absorbing, and then keeping it in their folder. We never really revisited it. Mystery science is great because it does involve hands-on learning activities. The students are making models, they're analyzing pictures and videos, but I needed to do something more. So that's where I have employed the Learning by Design model and the SAMR model to serve as a roadmap for instruction for this unit. The guiding questions that I want my students to consider as we are going through this process are listed here. We're focusing on how organisms interact with the environment. We're talking about how different parts of the ecosystems can be affected both positively and negatively. For our final project, I want the students to be exposed to the topic of the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone. They're going to identify pros and cons of this and then pick which side they support. Prior to my students completing the final product, where they are answering those questions regarding the pros and cons of the reintroduction of wolves and identifying their point of view, we're going to go through the activities within the Learning by Design placemat in order to get there. So for the experiencing phase, we're identifying basically the student's background knowledge, and then we're going to bring in some more resources, different videos, articles, pictures, to see what students can get, what new information they can get out of that. Within the conceptualizing phase, this is where we're going to start identifying some terms. We might create a glossary as a class or independently. And then we're going to take these terms and we're going to look for patterns. We're going to look for overarching concepts. So we might do that by creating some sort of concept map or a Poplet. Within the analyzing phase, this is where we start introducing the topic of their final project, where we start talking about the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone. We're going to talk about what that is, how that happened, why that came about, and then the students will have to identify the pros and cons as it relates to that reintroduction. In order to apply this information, the students will be creating their final presentation in Google Slides. This is so that they can communicate what they've learned and then they can share that out. So as I went through the placemat activity within the sequencing phase, I went through and I identified 4 different areas, whether it was independent or collaborative and whether it involved technology or not. So this is what I've come up with so far, and I think these could go anyway. This is just what came to mind first, but I think this is a good balance between the different areas because using the research process with technology and creating something within our science instruction is brand new for my students. So for the final project, again, they're researching the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone. They're going to create a Google Slides presentation that highlights the pros and cons, and then they will establish their point of view and support with evidence. They will be given a checklist, which this is something I learned is beneficial to my students because it provides them with their tasks that they need to complete. But I'm also going to provide them with a template. This is very basic, but I notice that my students need some sort of template that they can modify, because if I don't provide them with this, they're going to spend way too much time trying to figure out how to insert text boxes and all the functional things that are associated with Google Slides rather than actually creating their presentation. For the ISTE student standards, I really focused on the knowledge constructor when I was creating this redesign, especially with 3A and 3D. Students are planning and employing research strategies, but they're also building their knowledge by exploring real-world issues. For the educator standards, I focused a great deal on viewing the educator as a designer. I wanted to create opportunities for my students that I previously didn't have. Previously, it was very surface level. We read articles and answered questions. This redesign, the way that we're doing this, I'm hoping that by engaging in the research process, their understanding is deeper than what it was prior to this. So in conclusion, I relied heavily upon the learning by design model, especially that placemat activity, to serve as a guide to build background knowledge before the creation of the final product. There's components of the SAMR model woven into the final presentation, specifically the augmentation level of the SAMR model, because we're using technology for researching and to create a final product. Also, my goal is that somehow this project, this presentation is shared. So I'd like to do that by uploading it to Google Classroom or to Seesaw to share their learning with others.